The HSS Jackdaw drifted through space like a forgotten relic, its hull scarred and faded, its engines groaning with every jump as if complaining about still being alive. Once a cargo hauler, now a poorly funded patrol ship, it was the last thing anyone expected to protect a star system, and that was exactly why Commander Ray Vance had been assigned to it, because no one believed there was anything worth protecting in the Kender sector, and no one believed in her either, not since the tribunal that stripped her rank and scattered her career like space dust. But Vance, stubborn and sharp-eyed, took command with silent determination, commanding a skeleton crew of rejects, washouts, and oddballs like Juno, the sarcastic gunner with a criminal record, and Dr. Emmel, a medical officer who spoke more to his plants than people. Life on the Jackdaw was slow, quiet, and painfully dull, until one routine patrol near Kender, a gas giant wrapped in stormy blue clouds, changed everything when an unusual signal appeared on sensors, faint, irregular, and pulsing like a heartbeat. It was dismissed by the fleet's central AI as background interference, but Vance, her instincts flaring for the first time in years, ordered a closer look despite the crew's groans about wasting fuel and time, and soon they found themselves floating near the source. A sleek black ship, unlike anything in the human database, hidden beneath the swirling clouds of the gas giant, cloaked with reflective shielding, almost invisible unless you knew where to look, and even then it shimmered like a ghost. Vance narrowed her eyes as they approached, running silent and close, and Juno gripped his controls nervously as the ship's weapons were powered down, waiting, watching, unsure if they were staring at a derelict or something far worse. And when a sudden spark of energy crackled across the alien ship's hull and a turret swiveled their way, everyone on board froze until the Jackdaw system screamed a warning, and the black ship fired. The first bolt grazed their starboard side, sending the crew tumbling as alerts blared and sparks flew, and Vance shouted orders with calm fury, pulling the Jackdaw into a wild corkscrew dive through the upper cloud layer, dodging 2 more shots while Emil frantically patched leaks, and Tink, their engineer, rerouted power to the outdated shield grid, yelling that it wouldn't hold for long. But Vance wasn't done. She brought the ship up again, closer this time, trusting in her crew and her gut, and launched a pair of probe drones at the enemy ship. Just before they spun behind a storm cell and out of view, the drones fed back just seconds of footage before being vaporized. But it was enough. The alien ship bore markings that no one had seen before, a triple-pronged symbol that shimmered with blue fire, and inside its core was a pulsing energy signature that suggested a power system generations ahead of human tech. Back on the Jackdaw, shields failing and hull barely holding, Vance ordered a jump back to Outpost K7, the closest listening post, and once there, she sent everything they had: sensor logs, footage, scans, and a detailed report warning of a potential alien invasion. But Command didn't believe her, claimed the Jackdaw's systems were unreliable and her crew unqualified, even suggesting the stress of isolation might be affecting her judgment. And when the order came to resume normal patrols and stop chasing ghost signals, the silence in the Jackdaw's command deck was heavy with disbelief and quiet anger. Vance stared at the blinking cursor of the dismissed report, her jaw clenched, and then she stood, turned to her crew, and simply said, "They won't help us, so we help ourselves." And with that, the Jackdaw vanished from scheduled patrol routes, slipping into back-channel ports, forgotten scrapyards, and old war zones where broken tech and buried secrets still floated. Vance made deals with smugglers and black market engineers, trading their fuel reserves for scavenged alien parts, while Tink worked day and night, reprogramming ancient weapon modules and bolting prototype shield arrays into the Jackdaw's aging frame, giving it claws to match its bark. Slowly, the ship became something else, not a warship by any traditional standard, but a machine of tricks and sharp teeth, fast, smart, and deadly in ways no one would expect, all hidden behind its battered hull and mismatched plating. Yet even as the upgrades continued, the crew grew restless, wondering if the threat was even real, until a garbled signal came in from a drifting lifeboat near the mining colony of Caldros Reach, with one terrified survivor repeating the same word over and over in a broken whisper. Karzik, a name no one had ever heard before, but one that made Vance's blood run cold, because the scout ship they'd encountered bore that very same symbol glowing across its hull, and as the crew listened in silence, hearing the final moments of a colony lost in screams and static, Vance stood once more, her voice hard as steel. This isn't about orders anymore. This is about survival. And with that, the Jackdaw powered up its jump drive, setting course for the edge of known space where no one expected them to go, toward the darkness where the real war was about to begin. The HSS Jackdaw, bruised and battered but alive, emerged from the jump cloud near an abandoned mining outpost called Ravix 9, hidden deep in an asteroid belt no sane captain ever visited. And that was exactly why Commander Ray Vance chose it. Here, surrounded by broken machines, twisted metal, and forgotten wrecks, she would rebuild her ship without eyes from command or enemy scouts watching. And as the Jackdaw settled into the shadow of a massive derelict refinery, her crew got to work, unsure if they were preparing for a real war or chasing ghosts, but Vance was certain now. The name Karzik etched into her thoughts like a warning bell she couldn't unhear. First, she called in favors from old contacts, encrypted messages sent through deep space relay buoys to people who owed her, feared her, or simply respected what she once stood for, people like Tink's old mentor, a rogue engineer named Boro Len, who arrived in a rust-crawler ship 3 days later, dragging a barge full of illegal tech, stolen parts, and a strange prototype power core no one could trace. And though Boro laughed when he saw the Jackdaw, calling it a floating scrap pile with ambition, he stayed to help, lured by the promise of doing something great. Something dangerous and unsanctioned. Vance's plan was clear. Rebuild the Jackdaw in secret, using parts no military database would recognize, systems too old or too new to track, and weapons that could strike before sensors even blinked, and day by day, the ship began to change inside, not outside, because the battered exterior had to remain as it was, unassuming, invisible, harmless to the untrained eye, while Tink rewired the old plasma conduits into new power channels that could support high-speed energy bursts. Juno trained the crew on guerrilla-style tactics using drones, decoys, and sensor spoofers they stole from an abandoned stealth drone carrier they found drifting half-dead near Sigma Drift. Email worked to improve the medbay, installing nanite injectors and cryopatches that could heal wounds twice as fast, and even found an alien medical kit in a crate Burrow had stolen from a wrecked Karzik drone. Inside was a healing gel that glowed faintly and hissed like it was alive. But when tested, it closed a deep wound on Juno's arm in seconds. The crew grew silent after that, knowing what it meant. These invaders weren't just coming, they were advanced. More than anything humanity had fought before. Meanwhile, Vance locked herself in the ship's old war room, going over sensor logs, watching the footage of the black ship from Kender IV again and again, counting weapon ports, analyzing energy trails, mapping symbols, trying to understand what kind of force was out there, and how soon it would reach human space in full. She also knew command wouldn't act until it was too late, and that meant the Jackdaw had to stay in the dark, off-grid, a ghost ship preparing for war alone. One night, while scavenging through the wrecks with a boarding team, Juno stumbled on a strange cylinder buried beneath an old destroyer's debris field. It pulsed with faint energy, and Boro said it was a Karzik memory shard, a rare device used to store mission data. Once aboard, they connected it to a custom decryption rig built from 5 different computers, and over hours of silence and flickering screens, images began to form schematics of Karzik ships, battle simulations, even footage of colonies being wiped out in brutal, precise strikes. Vance watched in grim silence, realizing the attack on Cauldro's Reach was only a test, a preview of a much larger assault planned on the Arclight Gate, the main jump hub between human core worlds and the outer colonies. And she knew then that if the gate fell, hundreds of systems would go dark in days. They had weeks at most, maybe less. She gathered the crew, now tired but loyal, hardened by work and whispers of war, and laid out a bold plan not to warn command again, but to use the Jackdaw to follow Karzik scout ships, study their movements, intercept their communication relays, and auxiliary power to the shielding grid. As the third cruiser finally located them and began its first coordinated assault, beams of purple energy slicing through space as the Jackdaw spun sideways, absorbing 2 hits to its outer hull while retaliating with a focused laser burst that pierced the Karzik ship's sensor dome, now partially blind. That cruiser fell back to regroup, But Vance didn't give it the chance. She ordered the Jackdaw forward into the heart of the drone swarm, where Juno deployed the ship's final trick, a pulse bomb disguised as a cargo container, designed to emit a massive electromagnetic shockwave on detonation. And when it went off, the swarm froze, scrambled, and fell apart, their connections broken, their programming looped, creating just enough space for the Jackdaw to fire a precise volley of kinetic rounds into the weakened hull of the first cruiser, shattering it from the inside. The explosion lit up the station's dark side, giving hope to the trapped civilians and panic to the remaining Karzik forces, who had never seen a human ship fight like this, not big, not loud, but clever and sharp and everywhere at once. Vance didn't stop to celebrate. She ordered an immediate extraction run, docking with the station just long enough to take on survivors and station records, then ordered Juno to target the last enemy ship's fuel lines with sniper precision rounds, each shot tearing deeper until the cruiser began to pull back, limping, its drone support scattered or destroyed. The Jackdaw, hull smoking and systems near overload, jumped just as the enemy launched a final barrage, vanishing into hyperspace with seconds to spare, leaving only debris, confusion, and stories behind. Hours later, back in a hidden drift zone, the survivors were transferred to a civilian freighter, and word of the rescue began to spread. Even without official reports, whispers of a rogue ship with old bones and new teeth, striking like a shadow and vanishing before the enemy could react. Vance listened to the stories grow, knowing it would soon be harder to hide, that command would come looking, but she didn't care. The Jackdaw had proven itself, not as a warship of power, but of precision, speed, and purpose. And now they had real data, real proof of the Karzik threat, and a crew that believed in something bigger than orders. As the ship drifted silently in deep space, hidden once more, Vance stood alone at the observation window, watching the stars and thinking of what came next, because the enemy would not stop after Corellis. And now they knew a ghost was hunting them. The HSS Jackdaw, still worn and patched despite its victories, drifted through the outer rim of the Dalvian Drift, a dead zone filled with ion storms, wrecked satellites, and shattered relics of past wars. A place most fleets avoided because navigation was a nightmare and comms were almost useless, but Commander Ray Vance had no intention of hiding anymore. Not fully, because the time had come to shake the galaxy awake, and to do that, she needed to make noise in the most unexpected way. Her plan was simple and dangerous. Strike a Karzik relay station hidden inside the drift, steal their fleet positioning codes, and then use them to disrupt enemy communications across 5 sectors, maybe more, and draw out the core of the invasion fleet before they were ready to move. Except there was one major problem. Between the Jackdaw and the station was Fleet Sigma 11, an elite human battle group assigned to patrol and protect nearby trade routes, made up of 6 heavily armed ships led by the infamous Admiral Roke, a man known more for his ego than his tactics. And the worst part was he didn't believe in the Karzik threat at all. Vance knew that from her last attempt to send intel, when Roke laughed off her warning as ghost chasing, saying no real enemy could hide from human satellites or outthink modern AI defenses. And worse, he called the Jackdaw a flying joke that should have been scrapped years ago now. As the Jackdaw slipped through thick clouds of ion-charged gas and magnetized debris, Vance watched the Sigma 11 ships on her sensor grid shining like proud, polished blades, while the Jackdaw hid like a shadow between the stars. She didn't want to fight them, but she knew that once they spotted her near a restricted zone, they'd assume she was up to something illegal or foolish, and Roke would be more than happy to destroy her just to make a point, so she had to be fast, invisible, and smarter than every sensor system those cruisers had. Tink rerouted auxiliary power through the stealth modules while Juno prepped the new decoy missiles, tiny, quiet projectiles with hologram skins and signal repeaters, meant to mimic Karzik attack signatures, and when launched, they would appear on human sensors as enemy fighters, diving toward the Sigma ships, triggering alarms and drawing attention away from the Jackdaw. Vance's plan was not to harm anyone, just to give Roke and his fleet something to chase while she slipped past into the Karzik relay zone. Everything depended on timing and illusion. When the decoys launched, they did exactly what she hoped. 4 red alerts lit up on the Sigma 11 scanners, and almost at once, the cruisers moved into formation, weapons locking on the fake targets while their comms burst to life with confusion and half-shouted orders. And in that perfect moment of chaos, the Jackdaw glided under their sensor net, barely a whisper against the storm, slipping past the fleet that still believed it was safe. Inside the drift's deeper zone, the real threat waited, the Karzik relay stations. A massive black structure buried inside a hollow asteroid, bristling with antennae and signal towers, its shape angular and strange, like it was grown more than built, and around it spun a slow circle of defense drones and signal-sweeping probes. All silent, all listening, Vance didn't hesitate. She ordered a direct approach under the asteroid's curve, where the station's blind spot had been mapped from weeks of recon, and while Tink jammed the probe's scans, Juno fired a pair of spine-piercing slugs at the relay's outer casing, breaching the surface just long enough to launch a virus package into the system. Within seconds, the Jackdaw's screens flickered with alien code, then translated files, fleet routes, and Korsic movement schedules. It was more than they had hoped for, a complete picture of where the invasion forces were hiding, when they were moving, and what they planned to hit next, including Haven's Reach, one of the largest human refugee colonies near the frontier, scheduled for attack in just 4 days. But their success came with a price the moment the data began transferring. The station's defenses came online, beams of purple light slicing through the dark as drones activated and zeroed in on the Jackdaw's position. Vance barked orders, pulling the ship into a tight spin while Tink rerouted power to the rear thrusters, and Juno launched countermeasures as beams lit up the hull. One struck close, ripping a hole in the lower deck, but Emil sealed it fast with the emergency patch drones. The Jackdaw didn't stay to fight. It couldn't. The station was too heavily defended, and the real goal was to escape with the data intact. So Vance spun the ship back toward the storm path, diving straight into the ion field just as the first wave of drones gave chase. And behind them, the station sent out a pulse beacon, a call to nearby Karzik forces. But it was too late. The Jackdaw vanished into the magnetic fog, scrambled its trail, and rerouted through a gravity fold hidden in the drift's edge. As they emerged into safer space, alarm still ringing and the hull scorched in 3 places, Vance finally breathed, just once, before locking the data into secure files and sending fragments of it across hidden channels to every human fleet command that would listen. She knew Roke would mock it, would call it fabricated, but she also knew that the files had timestamps, enemy coordinates, and recordings that couldn't be faked. And once those targets started falling exactly as predicted, even the ones who laughed would be forced to admit the truth. Hours later, as the Jackdaw drifted near a quiet moon to make repairs, a private message came through an encrypted pulse from someone inside Sigma 11, a junior officer who'd secretly scanned the Jackdaw during the decoy attack and realized the ship wasn't what it appeared to be. The message was short. "You were right. Some of us believe. What do you need?" And for the first time, Vance saw a crack in them. Silence, a spark of unity, and she answered with a list of parts, coordinates, and one final line: "Tell them we're not a joke. We're just the beginning." The HSS Jackdaw floated in high orbit above Haven's Reach, its hull still scarred from the last escape, its engines humming low as the crew worked in near silence, knowing that everything they had done so far, all the sabotage, the data heists, the near misses had led to this one moment. They had just 36 hours until the Karzik invasion force hit the colony below, and the human defense fleets, still arguing over the data's authenticity, were too far away to help in time. Commander Rick Vance stood alone on the bridge, staring at the tactical display, eyes locked on the red dots blinking closer with every passing second. The enemy fleet so large it looked like a wall of blood across space. Tink sat at the systems console, his fingers never stopping as he patched together shield arrays, power relays, and stealth systems all at once, using parts from drones, cargo panels, and even a broken food dispenser, while Juno calibrated every weapon manually, tightening bolts and realigning sensors with the calm focus of someone who understood this might be their last fight. Below deck, Dr. Emil had converted half the medbay into an AVAC pod assembly zone, because if they lost, someone had to carry the story. Someone had to make sure people knew that one broken warship and its crew had tried to stand. No orders came from command. No backup signals lit the void. and the only voice they heard came from the surface, a desperate, shaking message from Colony Overseer Rollin, asking if the signal was true, if the Jackdaw really was coming to help, if someone up there would fight for them. Vance answered without hesitation, her voice steady, promising not just help, but a wall between the enemy and the helpless. And as she closed the channel, she turned to her crew and said only one thing: "We're not a warship. We're a warning." They moved fast after that, laying out mines across the orbit path, rigging satellite husks with high-impact explosives, and wiring an ancient cargo barge with a decoy AI that broadcasted signals to mimic a full battle group, because if they couldn't win with strength, they'd win with cleverness, just like they always had. When the first wave of Karzak scouts dropped from hyperspace, they met empty space and silence, scanning for targets and finding only strange signal trails, erratic energy pings, and sensor ghosts. The Jackdaw waited in the shadow of Haven's moon, silent, powered down to minimal life support, and when the enemy moved closer, curious and cautious, that's when Vance gave the order. Juno fired the first strike, a sniper torpedo that sailed clean through space and split the lead scout ship in two without triggering any alarms, and the others only realized what happened when the mines detonated across their flanks, tearing their formation apart in seconds. Chaos followed as the second wave arrived to find their scouts destroyed and their path blocked by burning wreckage, and just as they regrouped, the Jackdaw appeared, drifting forward like a ghost, guns glowing, hull lights flickering like an old nightmare come alive. Vance sent an open message on all enemy frequencies, a short, sharp warning: turn back or be broken. The Karzak commander ignored it, and the full force of their ships dropped from orbit in a staggered attack wave, weapons blazing, drones screaming across the stars like a metal storm. But the Jackdaw moved like no ship its size should, diving, rolling, blinking in and out of stealth fields, firing precise shots that tore through engines, communication arrays, and targeting dishes, never wasting a single round, never holding still long enough to be hit. Enemy ships slammed into traps, mines, and even each other as confusion spread, their tight formation breaking apart as the Jackdaw cut through their flanks again and again, always from a new angle, always with brutal precision. The enemy responded with everything: beam cannons, plasma bolts, drone floods, but the Jackdaw endured, its shields flickering, its hull groaning, but it never stopped moving, never stopped fighting, and every time the Karzak thought they had it cornered, it slipped away and struck harder. On the surface below, the people of Haven's Reach stood on rooftops and mountain ridges, watching the distant flashes in the sky, listening to their comm feeds for updates, and cheering each time another enemy signal went dark. But even legends bleed, and by the time the main enemy cruiser entered the fight, the Jackdaw had taken hits to its port side, lost 2 defense arrays, and had smoke pouring from its primary engine vents. Tink rerouted power from life support to shields. Juno fired blind from a half-broken console, and Emil took over one of the repair drones himself just to keep the reactor from melting down. Vance stayed locked in her command seat, calculating vectors, adjusting trajectories, and calling shots with the calm of someone who had nothing left to lose except the truth of what they stood for. The final blow came when the Karzak flagship charged its main cannon, aiming not at the Jackdaw but at Haven's Reach, hoping to bypass the fight and win by fear. But Vance didn't allow it. She ordered the Jackdaw directly into the cannon's path, accelerating to ramming speed, firing every weapon, releasing every drone, unleashing everything the ship had left in one final strike that tore through the flagship's shields, cracked its hull, and collided with its command deck. Just as the cannon fired, the blast lit the sky like a second sun, and for a moment everything went silent. Then slowly, the enemy fleet began to retreat, scattered, leaderless, and afraid of the wreckage. Still glowing in orbit, the Jackdaw didn't answer any more calls, didn't send any more warnings, and for hours, people thought it was gone until a single emergency beacon lit up from the far edge of the system, weak but alive, a signal from an escape pod carrying Tink, Juno, Emil, and a critically wounded Vance, barely breathing but alive. Her last command locked into the pod's databanks: tell them this ship stood when others ran. Tell them legends never rust. And across human space, as the story spread, As the footage was shared, and as the colonies learned what one old warship and a handful of outcasts had done against impossible odds, the fleets no longer laughed, the admirals no longer doubted, and the Jackdaw became a name whispered in awe, carved into station walls, and painted on the hulls of new ships built for the war that had finally begun.